Welcome to Healthy and Wealthy Conversations, where we discuss everything that leads to health and wellness for your whole spirit, soul, mind, and body. Hi, and welcome to Healthy and Wealthy Conversations. I'm your host, Casey Bell, and today's guests are Dr. Jeep and Vanessa Naum. Let's get the show started. So you two are authors out of necessity. I would say, so you had a problem, you fixed it, and then you decided to write a book about it. So first, let's talk about the challenges you had in your relationship.
Actually, it wasn't challenges that we had per se as far as our marriage was concerned, but before I met Dr. Jeep, I was previously married. And so I understood what it was like to be in a relationship that was clearly not working. And on top of that was that my ex-husband was not willing to participate in any type of activity to make it better. So there was addiction as well going on there, and without him wanting to stop that. And so as a result, I just reached a point where I tried so many times. I tried everything that I could, and I was, left with a position that I had to leave the marriage because he did not have the capacity to be in relationship with me. And so from that experience, I took away, what works in a healthy relationship and what doesn't work. And then, I left that marriage, of course, and I met Dr. Jeep. And through our marriage preparation that we did, we learned a whole lot of tips and tricks for a healthy relationship. And also, he has experience as well.
Just to dovetail with that, Casey, I was born into a physician marriage. My dad, still alive, was a doctor. My mother was not. My grandfather was a doctor, and very dysfunctional. My dad was a narcissist, pretty bad. Still is, but I've come to grips with that to have a relationship with him. And his narcissism led to the dysfunction in the marriage. My mom really had no say, and his narcissism led to infidelity. And my desire was twofold at that time. One, I knew that I wanted to be married. Two, I knew I wanted to be a doctor, and that I knew for a fact that this kind of a relationship that existed between them did not have to happen, could have prevented to happen. And so Vanessa and I got together, we got married, and not long after we got married, we started into coaching marriage. And so we've been doing this for over 25 years. And it relates from both of our desires to help couples have the kind of relationship that they can have to help them overcome struggles. How the book came to be was that the book was to be used to help couples, and we use ourselves. Our relationship hasn't been without problems.
Because that's
However,
normal life, right?
right, and it hasn't been without pain points.
Correct.
But we have been able to overcome those pain points, and in how that we've overcome those pain points, we have wanted to show others. And in the book, we go through marriages in three different eras and go through problems that they have had and show that if certain principles and tools were used, that problems that occurred could have not necessarily been prevented, but certainly dealt with in a more productive manner. And so my desire was to write that book. And as a physician, I wrote it as if I was talking to a patient. Vanessa's had, my name is on it, but she has had a tremendous amount to do with how the book was written. In one of the chapters, she actually wrote the chapter, and that's chapter 9. But the way the publisher said that they couldn't, for whatever reason, do it. But needless to say, she had an awful lot to do with that. So I wrote it in a way that no matter what somebody's socioeconomic background or education was, that they could read this book, understand these tools, be helped by these tools. And it's not only a book that it is helpful with marriage, but it's helpful with regular relationship with friends, between people. The principles are, are that broad that they really can be helpful in any situation.
So before we talk about the solutions to some of the problems in marriage, first talk about what are some signs you're not ready to be married, because many people get married and they were never ready in the first place, and they should not have. And nowadays in society, it's getting married mostly because society says if you're not married with children by a certain age, there's something wrong with you. So many people get married just to be left alone. So what are some signs someone can see in themselves to let them know you're not really ready to be married, and some of the things they can do to prepare themselves to be ready for marriage?
That is an excellent question.
Oh, so good.
And I'm so glad that you asked that. What the listeners and anybody interested in, thinking about marriage and considering it, is that marriage is a team sport. And how you were before you were married or are married, it's uniting two people that are coming from totally different backgrounds and raised independent of one another, and you're merging a family. So what is needed is a whole lot of understanding and empathy, as far as understanding from what place each other is coming from. But there are other things that they should consider as well.
And again, such a good question, because this ends up being something that we coach about quite a lot with couples. What tends to happen before marriage engagement is that there are not enough substantive discussions about each other. For instance, do you want to have children? If you want to have children, how many children do you want to have? Are you okay with moving to another area because of a job? Or are you determined that you want to stay where we are right now because you have family roots that you don't want to be away from?
Another example is, are there friends? Like, are you used to going out several times a week? And is your expectation that when you get married, you're going to continue to go out with those friends every week? So, things change when you get married, and you're no longer living a single life.
So in some cases, if you talk about these things, they're going to be deal breakers, but that's okay. The problem that happens is these subjects are uncomfortable. So because they're uncomfortable, they're emotional, they tend to be ignored. And this attitude occurs that, well, this will be okay once we get married. Now, initially, it's like, okay, we have this physical attraction for each other. We're in this period that we're so into each other physically that we don't think rationally
We
about.
think that anything that is thrown our way, we're going to be able to overcome. And that's just not it. There are stages of marriage, and that initial phase of romance, when that romance phase wears off, and it's usually, average within the first 2 years of marriage, when that wears off and you really see each other for who you really are, it becomes a whole lot easier to communicate about things that you're unsatisfied with each other, and that leads to power struggles, and then you get into the power struggle and the arguments and the fighting and the disconnection that takes place. And what we are advocates of is talking about the hard things ahead of time.
There, you hear a comment like, well, geez, if I'd have known you were like this, if I'd have known it was going to be like this, I would have never married you. And then so we go, well, you didn't talk about this. And sometimes it's, well, yeah, we did talk about it, but really not in a lot of detail. And we thought things were going to be different after we got married. And then other things like, what do you want out of your relationship? What do you need out of your relationship? These you would be surprised, Casey, that when we have couples and we ask them these questions, what we get back is, wow, really didn't think about that.
Or I haven't thought about that for a really long time. Life just took over, and going through life just happened, and now we find ourselves in this position, and we have to work to put it back together, because down the road previously, we disconnected, and we didn't catch that soon enough. And so there are principles and best practices, so to speak, in the book that talk about how to maintain the connection, so that if you're veering off course, here's what you can do to bring it back on course.
And unless, I know a lot of people have destination weddings. Sometimes they're going to be it's non-denominational, but we see that there is just not enough marriage preparation with couples before they get married. At one time, we coached, engaged in couples, and we're so happy to be able to do so, because in some cases, there were deal breakers. They thought about it, and they didn't get married, which was a good thing. But then there were the other couples that, like we said, oh, well, it's going to be different once the rings are put on the fingers. And then they couldn't work things out afterwards, and then divorce happened.
And that's what happened to me in my first relationship. I knew that he drank a lot, but I thought things would change once we were married. Once he had me to come home to, that things would change. But I was wrong. It just got worse. And so I guess I was in denial, and had I known a lot more about alcoholism and seeing the signs, the wisdom, had I had the wisdom back then that I do now, I would never have gotten into that relationship to begin, or would definitely never have gotten married to begin with. And going through the process of being in that relationship and being married for 5.5 years, and then going through a divorce, I'm here to tell everyone, is very traumatic. And if you can recognize ahead of it that this just isn't going to work, it's far better to back off and recognize that it's not going to work than it is to get married and think, well, if it doesn't work, I'll get a divorce, because that's a whole lot of trauma that you can save yourself from experiencing.
So how would you suggest someone deal with themselves before marriage, as you said, you can clearly see this person is not someone, whether they're gambling, whether they're smoking weed, or you can see they may have a drug problem. You can see it, and you say to yourself, well, I'll settle for it, or it'll change, or maybe I can help them change. How do you deal with yourself that you're not getting into a relationship believing, in denial, believing that whatever they're doing now, it won't be when you get married?
Well, when we've had a chance to counsel or to coach those couples, a question would be, do you understand right now what this is going to be potentially after you're married? Especially if there's children involved, and if you're going to have children. And then, because Vanessa has been through what she's been through, it could be, another type of addiction, like you said, could be weed, or it could be alcoholism.
I think that
awareness is the big key.
Yeah, awareness and education. Back when I got married, it was close to 40 years ago. I couldn't Google something. Back then it was, I had to go to the library and get into encyclopedias. A lot of the addiction medicine information we have now, we didn't know back then. So I think we're situated in a better environment now to get information. And so that would be my recommendation, is research the topics and see, what applies to you, and then become aware of it.
I've had in my family, I have addiction in my family of drugs and of alcohol. In fact, my dad had some of that. And so when we come upon couples like that, we draw upon our own examples and tell them it's not that this can't, I think remedy is too strong, that this can't be helped, that there can't be some sort of compromise that can happen. It can. It's just
both couples have to want the same thing,
and it's a lot harder work. Now, if you're up for that, and you think that you have the constitution and the strength to be able to do that, well then I certainly am not going to say don't give it a try. But on the other hand, what we do after marriage is, neither one of us are addiction counselors. Even though we've had addiction in both of our families, we would continue coaching with the help of an addiction counselor with that. But that is huge. In regards to something else, again, I think awareness, and then using ourselves. For instance, if there's the woman doesn't want, or a husband doesn't want to have kids, so then we talk about the issue that we went through, which was
I just wanted to have one.
We wanted to have kids, but Vanessa was from a small family for a lot of reasons, and I was from a big family. We talked about it. I wanted to have 3, maybe 4 kids. She was wanting 1. And so we talked about it, and we made that cardinal mistake that we coach couples not to do. And that is to, this is a difficult subject. Vanessa, usually she was brought to tears about it, then I would feel bad about it. So we ignored it and got married. And then afterwards, got into discussing about starting a family, had a child pretty quickly, and then this specter came up of more kids, and caused a lot of stress, unneeded stress, and
Conflict.
to give Vanessa credit, I mean, she saw, I mean, some of it was unfortunately from my insistence, which really wasn't fair to her for me to do. But she said, you know, she accepted my want of having more kids, and we ended up having three. But it was very, you know, very stressful for her, and it would have been unneeded had we have taken that step and spent more time talking about it. It would not have been a deal breaker for us because there were so many other things that we agreed with. But certainly in some couples, there are one or the other that are adamant that they don't want children. And that's one that's difficult. You know, I'm one about compromises, but I don't know how you would compromise about not having kids. That's something that is very difficult for there to be a mid ground with that.
Yes, I would definitely agree. Well, then because I personally believe that sometimes it's best when you get into conversations with someone about a relationship, whether it's long term when you get married and you realize it's just not working out. Sometimes, in my opinion, it's best just to stay single and deal with yourself. Because when you talk about addiction and you talk about whatever else, maybe childhood trauma, we sometimes get married to ignore that, to pretend it's not there. So we're busy with marriage instead of dealing with. And so, do you ever find it where you tell a couple who are not married to maybe stay, I would say break up and deal with themselves, get therapy for themselves first before continuing the relationship to see if maybe there's something they're overlooking that needs to not be overlooked before marriage?
Yeah, we would just let them know that these are areas that when you get married are going to be major conflicts. So, what we recommend is that you seek help for those issues and work on yourselves independently. And then, as you work on yourselves independently, start applying the principles that we teach for marriage. Like, for example, when you do have an argument, because you're gonna, we're human, we're gonna have arguments. We're not going to feel that in love feeling for the rest of our lives. That's just not reality. So what we do is we teach reality. And when the reality of a conflict happens, there are some rules to not break. And one of those would be no name calling during an argument. You would be surprised at how huge that is. I mean, I'm the type of person that when I get really, really angry, oh my gosh, I just want to vomit at the mouth. And of course, every curse word comes out of my mouth and I could rip him to shreds with my words. But I made a decision a long time ago that I was going to hold on to myself because it was much better to win the battle and not lose the war. Because that, if I would have approached every battle like that, then incrementally I would be losing the war. And I thought, realistically, sit back. I don't want him to treat me that way. So therefore, I'm going to model the type of behavior that I want him to follow, which is, okay, I'm not going to use names to tear you down. So I'd appreciate that you do the same thing for me.
In fact, I can remember a specific instance where we had a couple, just like you said, they were all about getting married, and the the girl, she all of a sudden started having second thoughts. And it didn't necessarily have anything to do with him. It had to do with this almost dependence that she still had on her family. specifically her mom and dad. And this, I'm sure that it had come up before, but they were engaged, they were getting ready to get married, and
their wedding date was like 3 months away, and she's having cold feet and lots of trepidation, but the days are passing. And we said, time out here.
Mhm.
You don't have to get married in 3 months. And for you to say we're not getting married in 3 months is super courageous. It doesn't mean that you're never going to get married. It just means that you are stepping back in faith and in courage and admitting there are some things that you need to work out. And once those are worked out, stick the date back on the calendar. And that's exactly what they did.
He was he was very distraught
Mhm.
about it. He just was like I can't believe this. But as Vanessa said, they did that work. They pushed their date a little further. They got married and had a great marriage. Unfortunately, he had some medical problems and passed away, but they had a phenomenal marriage by all accounts that we knew once that happened. So that's an example of, it's difficult. Maybe, maybe you're going to have to separate for a while, and maybe that separation is going to cause you to break up. But if that happens in the long run, it's something that should have had and prevented you from a lot more trauma
and heartache. Yeah, absolutely.
That is all the time we have for you today on Healthy and Wealthy Conversations. This interview is not over though. Dr. G and Vanessa join me on The Ready Writer this Sunday. Join me then. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.